So today the topic of the presentation is leadership matters, because there's stuff going on in your organisation at the moment around cultural change, and it's really interesting to see how leadership plays a big part in that. But as I understand it, the hospital, the health service has a vision of how you want the culture to be. And before we even start, it's really important to get this out in the open. A vision without execution is just an hallucination. So if the organisation says, hey, this is where we want to go, this is what we want the organisation to be, but nobody does anything about it, we may as well go down the animal labs and get some LSD and have a party, because that's about the scope of the investment in the whole system. It's really important that we translate the big ideas into actions. And the problem is there's often a huge disconnect between the top level idea, this is where we want to go, and individuals within the organisation who have to change in some way to make that happen. So it brings me to the first, and I think one of the most important questions: why does change fail? Anyone got any ideas? Why does change fail? This is the interactive bit, by the way. Allowed to talk.
It's abandoned halfway through.
Abandonment, yes. Abandoned, good. Another one. Poor communication. What do you mean by that? Clarity and confusion. Lovely pair of words. It's true, isn't it? See, communication is one of those lovely buzzwords that goes across everything. When I say, what specifically do you mean from that? Now we get to something. We get to clarity. Clarity in something and confusion in something else. What else stops change? Planning, what do you mean by that? Yep. So without that, it fails. Absolutely. What else? Engagement is critical, isn't it? We'll talk about that today. Other ideas? Intrinsic value, I like that. So, but it's intrinsic value in many dimensions, because it's what's in it for the organisation. We also have to remember what's in it for the individual. Because, if it doesn't pass the what's in it for me test for an individual, why should they change? So I think there's a really critical learning in that we need to draw out at some point today. Anything else? Yeah, it's a lack of vision, isn't it? It's a lack of vision. If I don't know where I'm going, I don't know how I can get there. Great. Anything else? Yeah. Yep. And that's really important, because, at the moment you've got this vision of how you want the system to be. But do you as leaders have a vision of how you want the individuals to be that will deliver upon that system? Do you have this clarity in your own head about what that means? About how each person should act individually so it sums up to the systemic change that you want? Because as leaders we need that. Otherwise change is not going to happen. So today we're going to look at 3 different dimensions around change. The first thing is we're going to have a look at the people. So we're going to understand a bit more about people in the change process. So this can be quite useful for us to help us plan our way forward. We're then going to look at leadership, and really about developing a leadership toolkit so you guys can drive change as leaders. And then, most importantly, so it doesn't remain a hallucination, is to create a list of implementable actions, things that you guys can do immediately when you leave here today to empower you as leaders to drive this whole change process. So, this is the bigger picture. This is why doesn't an organisation change? But let's talk about people. What is it about people? Why don't they change? Why don't people change? Seen it all before. Sorry? Afraid. Fear. Put that over here. Just a quick word on this one, seen it all before. There's a thing called change fatigue. I've worked in a number of big organisations, and what I call it is agitation management. Because you've got the people at the top of the organisation, and what they do is they get anxious. I feel out of control. I don't know what I'm doing. So they start a program, they start a project in the business. And then before that project has even had a chance to work through the system, I'm feeling out of control again. Quick, I need to start a new project because it makes me feel in control. So I push another project through the business. And then I push another one and another one and another one. And the people end up sitting there and all these projects start coming on to them, don't they? And they get this change fatigue. Well, I don't know what you want me to do. And in the end, the smart ones sit there and go, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to see what happens around me before I make a choice as to what I'm going to do, because I invested in this, and I invested in that, and I invested in that one over there. And each time, you know what happened? I was the one who was caught out. The people who didn't move used no energy, and nothing happened. So it's really interesting that if they've seen it all before, we get in that change fatigue mode. If the organisation is in agitation management, so lots of different projects to make ourselves feel in control, we make people feel out of control. Where does the control sit in your organisation? It's a really important one. And fear, we could spend a week on that. Why do people fear change? We'll talk about that in a minute. So why else don't people change? Yep. Well, it's status quo, but also happy. They want it. I don't want to change. You want me to do this, but I don't want it. I'm happy here. Loss aversion. The average ratio of loss aversion is 2 to 1, which means if you lose $50, you have to find $100 to counteract the feeling that has for you. And that varies from 1.5 to 2.5 in most individuals. But loss aversion people would rather have to gain twice as much to counteract what they lose. So think about that when you've got somebody in a change process. Change implies a loss of something and a gain of something else. And yet when you don't explain the gain strong enough, and all they see is the loss, is it any wonder? Status quo. You also have an endowment effect, which I'll talk about in a minute. In fact, we should shift onto that. Because if you think about it, status quo is probably one of the biggest things as a leader you need to change if you're going to get people to move. Now, systems theory, anybody know systems theory? Yeah. First order change, I change something within the system, but the system remains the same. So, for example, in your department, take a manager out, you put a new manager in, but things go on the way they've always gone on. Okay, that's a first order change. Second order change is when you change the system, you change things up so it doesn't operate the way that it used to. I've seen many teams where they've said, great, we need to put in a new leader, or we need to get some fresh blood into that team, into that group. They go into that group, and what happens? Regardless of how strongly they want to impact upon that system, the system already has a status quo. It already has culture. It already has rules. It already has behavioural norms. And before you know it, that person has now formed in a lockstep into the system. So all the good intention of the new person coming in is lost. They're now just like the old person. So when we think about change, we have to think about the fact that we have to go from a first order change to a second order change. We don't want to change one little bit of the system, we have to change the system. We have to change the way that people work together if we want to change the culture. Has someone got a definition of culture, by the way, before we kick off, since we're talking about cultural change? What's the definition of culture? It's not the stuff that grows on the bread left at the fridge from Christmas. That's different. Anyone got a definition of culture? The way we do things. Yeah, that's a neat explanation of it. For me, it's the unconscious contracts that we enter into our behaviours as a group. That we as a group unconsciously decide on. So, it's, right now, everybody in this organisation could get your finger, stick it up your nose, up to the second knuckle, and do a bit of farming. Everybody in this room can physically do that. But nobody is choosing to. Because it's not culturally acceptable within this organisation, I imagine, to be doing that on a regular basis. It's only a guess, by the way. Because what a culture does is it sets up rules about two things. What is acceptable and what is valued. And the culture sets up exactly that. What is acceptable and what is valued. So when you think about it, everyone here sitting there with their finger up their nose, if that's not deemed acceptable, people will select it out of their behaviours. Unconsciously, they will make that choice to select out that behaviour. But what's valued is selected in more often. So it's a selection process. And we do it unconsciously. We're not going, wow, I really shouldn't stick my finger up right now. We just make that choice because there is an unconscious contract between us as a group. And it's interesting because this as a group would form a culture. An individual team in another part of the hospital would form a culture. Straight away, there are a series of unconscious contracts that people enter into which become the culture of the organisation. And we can shape those reasonably quickly, should we choose to. 7 leaders but the whole concept is, unless we understand what we're trying to change, how are we going to change it? So if we're really trying to change at a level what's acceptable and what's valued in this organisation to get us to that vision, then we have to take certain actions. And the status quo will work against it because the system will try and stabilise itself around how it's always been. Its current unconscious contract is what rules. Because I walk into that same group, I walk into that same meeting room with those same people, and what do I get? Straight away in my head, I know what's accepted and what's valued. Straight away. I go into this board meeting and I know what's accepted and what's valued. I go in the warehouse and I know what's accepted and what's valued. I'm in the pharmacy, I know what's accepted and what's valued. I don't have a list, I don't have to tick them off. I know them because we're geared socially to tune our way into those things. And you people find their way into the culture by the culture actually just pushing them gently. Oh no, we don't do that around here. And me watching you going, oh, I see that when I yell at the secretaries, that's accepted. Oh, I see when I make a joke about the boss, that's valued. People laugh. I get something out of that. When I interrupt in a meeting and I'm the big noisy one, people think that's really clever. There's your culture. When I tell a story, that's the culture. So it's really fascinating to think about it. What are we trying to change? And the status quo is the culture that exists now. And unless I've got a reason to do something different, I'm not going to do something different. So we need a second order change. And then we start to think about what goes on in people's heads. Because we want them to go from here, from this culture to that culture. Just it's a simple swap across. They look pretty similar. There's really no reason why they shouldn't go. But loss aversion, as I said, is a really big thing. Because if I'm here, this is mine. The endowment effect suggests that if I have something, own something, or believe something is mine, I give it more value than it has. So somebody's got their favourite Def Leppard t-shirt, they can buy another one for $30. It's because it's theirs, you walk up to them and you say, oh, can I give you $50 for that t-shirt? I don't know. Can I give you $100? They might go, oh, maybe. They imbue it with more value than it really has. Your people are doing that with their jobs, with their roles, with their unconscious positions in their cultural groups, with their informal connections to people, with the way they operate. So there's a massive loss aversion when you start to shift people here. And as I'll talk about in a little while, what a lot of change people do is they say, we need to change from this. They don't tell you about where they're going to land. So all I'm doing is I'm building up a massive loss aversion and I'm doing nothing to talk about the benefit. I'm giving them nowhere to land. And you want them to change. People also do this thing called intensity substitution, where because of uncertainty, I don't know what it looks like over there in the new change. So what I do is I ask myself, what would happen if something went wrong? And I think, oh wow, that's intensely bad. If something went wrong, I might lose my job. So I have this intensive negative emotion. And what I do is I substitute that into the harder question, the uncertain question. What's it going to be like after the change? Intensely bad. I double down. And you expect people to change. Because they're not asking the right question. Donald Trump at the moment is not getting people to think logically, he's getting them to think emotionally. Donald Trump is playing this game with the American population at the moment. He's getting them to double down emotionally every single day. Every statement he makes is completely out. Barack Obama couldn't say the things that Donald Trump is saying. Hillary Clinton couldn't say the things that Donald Trump is saying. Because he's trying to avoid logic and he's trying to hit people right with that intensity and substitution. I'm a winner, therefore I'm going to be a winner as a president. I'm strong and tough, therefore I'm going to be a good president. He wants people to avoid the question, will Donald Trump be a good president? And he wants them to answer simple, emotional questions and get an intensely positive answer which they substitute in. Problem is he probably doesn't even know what he's doing. Probably just doing it naturally. So we have to pay attention to these things and remember that change implies uncertainty. So we don't even double down, we triple down. And we wonder why people don't change. We wonder why the status quo is such a lovely place to be. People will tolerate extreme pain to avoid uncertainty. People will enjoy being in displeasure and in pain and suffering to avoid uncertainty. So many people are just focused on getting certainty in their lives. Because what people are doing is they're always asking themselves three unconscious questions. Now, this is a simplification, I suppose, of Maslow and his pyramid of needs. But it's really quite simple. In any circumstance, people are asking themselves three questions. Question number one, am I safe? And that's not, safe from tigers and lions, that comes into it. But am I socially safe? Am I culturally safe? Am I in career? Am I safe in my career? People are asking the safe question that goes across a whole series of categories. Once they've answered that question and then move to the next level, am I successful? They don't ask that question until they know they're safe. Am I successful? And they try and be successful once they know they're safe. Once they're successful, they then start to go into that higher level stuff, which is, am I satisfied? The moment that we trigger fear, where do people go? Am I safe? Always. People are in safety mode. And if we don't help people answer these three questions about what it's like on the other side of change, they're not going to want to change. They're going to want to say, certainty. I'd rather be certain because I'm safe here. I know how to be successful here. I know how to be satisfied here. And you want me to go over here? I don't know how to be safe here. I don't even know if it's safe. I don't even know how to be successful over here. What are the rules? What does success look like? You haven't shown me that. How do I get ahead? And actually, I don't even know if I'd like it. How would I be satisfied here? So we go, oh great, we've got this new change program. Great, so you're here, things are going well for you, nice group, things are happening, great day at work, go home, all the rest of it. But now we want you to be completely different. We want you to transition over here. And if I'm not addressing the three unconscious questions, don't expect people to shift. They will prefer certainty, pain and discomfort over uncertainty and having these questions unanswered. Any questions? Hopefully you're all feeling safe and successful from that. So then we come to a bit more social side, because it's really important that we dig into this stuff so we understand the people that we're trying to change. Because we're not going out and just changing over road signs or moving plants in a garden We're actually dealing with people. And people are curiously complex creatures. You guys work in a health system, you guys must know that. So they're incredibly complex. And the social psychology is really starting to show a whole lot of interesting stuff. The idea of belonging. So if I identify with this group, then I get personal satisfaction out of being identified with that group. Some of you in this room might be Collingwood supporters. Some of you might even get satisfaction out of identifying with being a Collingwood supporter. But that's a group that you identify with. And that gives you a measure of satisfaction. So what happens when I disband this group? I do something to the group. I take that away from you. Loss aversion. We also have normative group theory where I was talking about the culture is that what's accepted and what's valued. The group has norms. The group holds and acts through norms, and I know what that is. I don't know what are the norms over here. Norms give me incredible comfort, and they give me really simple directions on how I should behave in my group. What are the norms over there? What are the norms in the new? If I don't know that, I'm not going to enjoy it. How I value myself. So I'm also going to sit there on this change process and say, I don't know if I can. What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not clever? What if I'm a fraud? What if I can't? What if I? 70% of the population have clinical level anxiety. 20% have clinical level depression. You start asking people to do things, actions, in uncertainty. How they view themselves. Are the perfectionists amongst you and your staff? People with anxiety, people with depression, how are they going to respond when we ask them to take actions of change, when we force change upon them? There's a whole lot of things about the way they view themselves which is going to hold them back. Defensive behaviours. I've popped this on the board because this is what you will see. These are the 5 defensive behaviours. And you'll see them in change a lot. Blame. It's their fault. Deny. The Bart Simpson one. I didn't do it. Don't blame me, I didn't do it. Justify. Oh, we did this because. Oh, we had to do this because. Oh, the justification. Oh, no, I couldn't change because I had to do this. All justification. Attack. Those people, I attack them or I avoid it. No, I can't do that now. No, don't put that in front of me. These defensive behaviours, these 5, are signals that people are in discomfort. That people's boundaries are being crossed, that they're under stress and under threat. You will see them all the time in your departments, you'll see them all the time in your families, you'll see them all the time. You know what? You watch any soap operas on television, they basically build their stories out of these 5 approaches. All communication. There's zero effective communication in any of those shows. They're all listening. So you will see these as part of the approach, as part of how people respond. And they're a signal of discomfort. Discomfort is not necessarily a bad thing. If you can use it to help channel people to something else. But if all you do is you simply put people into discomfort and you don't show them which way to go, then it's not pleasant for anybody. Okay, so pay attention to these, but also pay attention to these in yourself. When your team doesn't move, and your response is this. How effective do you think that's going to be as a response? Self-awareness in a leader is a really important characteristic to pay attention to when these things are coming up in you, short-circuit them and find a useful way to communicate, not a soap opera way to communicate, so you can get an outcome that actually is valued and matters to both of you, a negotiated settlement. And the last point, relational dynamics, is you also have to be aware of the way that you interact with people at all levels. So the people that you're changing, you have a relationship with them, and that is going to be in flux during this uncertainty and change. So You can provide certainty in your style, which is great, but you also have to provide flexibility in the dynamics of your relationship, because that's going to change as you shift across. As you shift across to more accountability, more responsibility, more empowerment. It means that things are going to change in the way that you work with people. Unless the relationships are dynamic, all you're doing is a first order systemic change. So, someone said it before, there's also logical reasons why people don't change. You want me to change over there? I don't know why. I don't know why you want me to change. I don't know how you want me to change. I don't know what you want me to change into. I don't know if I can change. That's a really important one. And actually, if someone said, I don't want to change, I'm happy here. What's in it for me? The answer is nothing. Don't expect too much assistance in driving change. So it's really important to ask what is missing. What haven't you given them as a leader to help them see the what's in it for me value of the change? What's missing? It's a really important question. So leadership, we come to you guys now. What's really important in terms of leadership is, I often draw a model when I'm working with organisations, that there's actually 4 functions in a business or 4 functions in an organisation. There's the producers, the people who do stuff. So if it's a widget factory, it's the people who are making the widgets. Then you've got the managers. What managers do is ensure that the processes which are effective and efficient are followed by the producers. So there is a process, managers ensure that the processes are followed, because we know that gives an efficient and an effective outcome. So the process in place, the manager oversees that it's done. Then you've got the leadership, leaders. And what leaders do is they change process. They adapt process, they adapt systems so that over time there are new processes that the managers oversee so that the production is more efficient, more effective. So if I was making buggy whips, and the leader has to say, actually something's changing here, the horse and cart is going out, I need to make something, I need to make leather steering wheel covers for these new things called automobiles. I need to change, I need to be a leader and lead the organisation out of its old process into a new one. Otherwise, I'm gone. How many buggy whips would I be selling today? Not very many. And then the last group are the constrainers. And if you imagine, these are the ones who say, this is where we play. So it's like putting up the flags on the beach where people swim between. So the constrainers say, we are a health service. We are not an entertainment and cinema complex. Sometimes, but so the constrainers say, this is the type of organisation that we are, and keep the leaders swimming between the flags. Keep expanding, leading, but these are the flags. And if you're a health service, the constrainers are saying it's about patient care. It's about providing the best patient care, and everything swims in line with that. So that's the constraint. Leaders find better and new ways to do that. Managers take what's passed down and ensure that the people within the organisation actually do that. So managing's easy. Here's the manual, just make sure people follow it. But leadership is change. Leadership by its nature implies change. So everybody in the room here should be a change expert, because if you come here informally or formally as a leader, that's your role. The truth is, in most organisations, most people are doing a mix of all 3 at the same time, aren't they? I'm doing a bit of producing, I'm doing a bit of managing, I'm doing a bit of leading, and you've got to bounce between the 3. But unless you define what those roles are in an organisation, how do you know what you're doing at any particular time? Are you managing something now? Are you leading something now? Are you getting on and doing something now? And then it's up to generally a very select number of people in the organisation to be doing this. But you can also do that within your groups. Because leadership is really interesting as a philosophy, because the leader is the most visible and salient member of any group. Everybody looks to the leader. Even when you don't think they are, they're all having a sneaky peek to see, what are you up to? What are you doing? Because what you do will direct what they do. That's why walking the talk is such a critical thing. And the halo effect is really important here, because someone has seen you as being good enough to beat the leader. You come with certain qualities about they think you're capable until you prove them otherwise. They think you're a winner, they think you're successful, they think you're powerful, they think you've got all these things. If you've got people in your teams to write down what they think are your core characteristics, the halo effect, the fact that you're identified as a leader, will greatly impact upon what those things are. Psychologically, they answer the one question, okay, they're a leader, which means they must be. So if you've got that, why not use that to your advantage? Why not use that as an idiosyncratic credit? As a leader, you can do things that they cannot. And you're seeing it. You see it in extremist groups. You see it in all sorts of things. You're seeing it in American politics in terms of conservative politics with the Tea Party. This is a group. The leader is the holder of the norms and behaviours, and they sit in the middle. Okay? Here is an out-group. Everybody wants to say, no, I'm not like them, so they all shift this way, as far away from the out-group as possible. The leader determines where they end up. The leader stays there, they come back. They can hold this position. If the leader moves further, so conservatives, we go across here to the Tea Party, the whole group shifts. And they look to the leader for that signal, because the leader is the holder of the standards and norms of the group. So as a leader shifts, the group shifts. So as your behaviour shifts, your team's behaviour will shift. And if you do this consciously and shift towards where you want to go, you'll bring everybody with you. You have idiosyncratic credit. They give you permission to do this. If you're in a meeting, you're the leader, and Joan down the front says, how do we make that in pink? And you as the leader go, no, let's talk about the finances. Let's talk about the numbers. That idea is lost. If as a leader, Joan says, how about we do it in pink? And I say, that's interesting. What do you guys think about pink? Now, all of you are taking up that idea using my idiosyncratic credit, my ability to direct and focus the group to focus on that particular thing. How often a great idea is lost because the leader doesn't use their credit to take that idea. It's a bane in innovation. It's a problem in innovation. So you've got idiosyncratic credit, it's time to use it because you are the holder. As a leader, you are the holder of the group norms, their values, their behaviours. And as you shift to something new, they will go with you. But if Crazy Bill over here goes off in a different direction, he's just out of the group. But if the leader who's in the middle moves, the group moves. So it's time to use the social psychology of you as leaders to help you empower change. But what I often see is people sitting on the sidelines going, you know what? You guys should go over there. You should change. I'll stand here. You guys here, you go over there. Go on, what have you got? His go. Change. I have to get here. And I have to lead the way. And I have to lead at a pace that they can follow. Because if I jump across, it's a big gap now. If I haven't done all that other stuff to help them break through the uncertainty and the fear and the loss aversion and everything else, why are they going to change? So leadership is such a critical thing. Have I got about 5 or 10? Cool. So I want to introduce you to the idea of change. This is really simple. If you want people to change, we need to do 4 things. We need to identify what the change is. So that is, tell them what this space here is in a very particular way. We need to destabilise the status quo. We need to break that status quo so it can't be what it was before. We've got to empower the people. We've got to give them things, empower them so they can change. And then we've got to act. We've got to activate every single time. Because change is a conscious process. We can leave it to chance and you guys can step up and say, this is where I'm leading them to. I'm leading towards the vision of the organisation because that's what we need and want. So if we think about identify, we need to start by thinking, well, change should be conscious and considered. And we need to identify, where are they now? We need to identify, well, what is that need or opportunity for change? So what's in it for them? What's in it for the organisation? What can we tap into to make this valuable? But also, importantly, what's the experience like for them in this future state? After the change, you will be doing X. And to be successful, you'll be doing A, B, C, and you can be satisfied because I can be talking directly to those unconscious needs. I can be explaining what it looks like over here, so it's no longer uncertain. I can try and show them the gain to counteract the loss aversion. Because we ask people to change, but if they don't know where they're going, it looks like that. I'm driving in the rain. I can hardly see the car in front of me. You want me to go where? People pull over when it's like this, don't they? And we don't want our staff pulling over. We want them to be able to get on the freeway and drive to our goals. Because you've got that toolkit where you can simply pay attention to, well, what's missing? Why aren't they changing? But also, it's really important to focus on what are they doing well that would work for them over here. Because if they're doing stuff over there, which will work here, we don't want to strip it down completely. Why don't we build on what they've already got? Why don't we build on their skills and capabilities? Build on the social networks that work. Build on anything we can that they can bring with them. Let's lessen the loss. Let's empower the positive. And then you can ask yourself the question, to get to where we're going, what really needs to change? And that is such an important question. What needs to change for this outcome to occur? What specifically needs to happen? How do people need to be behaving? What needs to change? Fly back up. Now the status quo, is, we've spoken about a bit, but we need to manipulate the resources and processes to ensure the status quo can't continue. Because if I'm happy here, I look over there, no, I'm not going to bother changing, off you go. I worked in an organisation and there was the particular department, they were going to close it down in about 3 or 4 years. What they did was they left the status quo as it was and they expected people to change. And these guys were still putting in outrageous budgets, doing all sorts of things. So I went, no, that's not happening. So I took away their board seat. I took away all of their budget. I left them with a minimal operating budget. And you should have seen how fast the little rats across to the other ship was sailing in a good direction. There was a sinking one over there. Shift, manipulate resources and processes so they can't do this anymore. Make this impossible. When that's impossible, they've got to go somewhere, and you give them a nice dry place to land over here, they'll come. But if you don't destabilise the status quo, what's holding them there, they won't change. It's very comfortable for them to not change. So, as you align things to how the new state will be, incentives, rewards, possibilities, it really does change things up. And then you've got the idea of empowering people. This first formula looks interesting, but all it is a behaviourist formula. It means that the behavioural outcome that you get is based upon 3 things: motivation, plus skills, plus infrastructure. We often believe that people don't do things because they're not motivated. If I had 3 pens and you said, Phil, juggle for me. Okay, 3 things. Said juggle for me. Okay, I could be the world's best juggler, and I could say, no, son, you're not going to get juggled. Or I could be the keenest kid in the world, and I go, yeah, I can juggle, but I've got no skill, they're going to fall on the floor. Okay, you're not going to see juggling. Or they don't have the infrastructure. You're not going to see juggling. Don't always think people are not motivated when they can't do something, when they're not going to do something. Check about the skill, the cognitive skill, what they think about it, and the performance skill. Can they actually do the task? Make sure they've got the infrastructure. Only then should we be thinking about the motivation. Because behavioural outcome is based upon these three things together, in balance. So it's worthwhile checking if somebody isn't doing something. It's not necessarily because they don't want to. There might be a reason why they can't. So it's a really interesting formula from a behaviourist perspective when you look at how people behave. They want an outcome, they can't get it, what's missing? Run that formula through your head. You want to engage people, they need to feel supported, they need to feel in control, they need to feel rewarded, and they need to see procedural justice. People complain to you, it's generally around one of these four things. People walk into your office and go, no, I'm not getting enough support, I'm not rewarded enough, he's not got no control over this thing that I love doing. Or, it's not fair, which is probably the most common one, isn't it? People want procedural justice. Transparency. People want to see how it's fair for them and everybody else. Hiding stuff does not help you in change. Transparency of process helps you in change. It's not, well, they're going to earn 600,000 and you're going to earn 400,000. That's outcome. This is how we decide how much people are going to earn, and everybody follows this process. And the outcome is what comes out of that process. That's procedural fairness, procedural justice. That's your big one. So in change, you want people to change. Make sure they feel supported to change. Give them control. What do they have agency over? How are they going to be rewarded? And what's fair? How do you determine what's fair? You answer those four things and people are empowered. And the last thing is activation. And this comes down to the very bottom thing. Walk the talk, no exceptions. You are the leaders, they're looking to you. You have idiosyncratic credit, you are the holder of standards, culture and norms. If you stand back and go, these guys should change, don't expect it to happen. They're looking for you to lead them. They're looking for you to teach them. They're looking for you to help. So you have to activate and be relentless. You also have to call people when they're not doing the behaviours that you expect over here. That's not good enough. What I'm not doing is I'm not saying you're not good enough. What I'm saying is that behaviour that you've just demonstrated is not good enough. Let's shift it to here. It's very different. One attacks the person, the other identifies a culture and standard that I want in the business. Don't be afraid to call people. You need to activate every single time. So if you think about it, your role as leaders is to do this in change. Identify, destabilise, empower and activate. Which brings us to the 6 things you can do. The first thing is commit. If you don't commit, don't expect anybody else to. You've got to walk in and believe in that and do everything to make it happen. If you don't commit, no one else is going to stand back and go, you can't. Get in there and do it. Communicate. Over-communicate by a factor of 10. If you want change to happen, you have to communicate until people go, I'm sick of hearing about it. Because most of the time, when you're speaking to someone, you're the third loudest voice in their head. They're thinking, what do I think about myself? What do they think about me? And now I'm taking in information from the conversation. You've got to break through. They're thinking about their fears. They're thinking about why they can't change. They're thinking about they've got to pick up their dry cleaning. Whatever it is, over-communicate. Don't under-communicate. It's critical. Coach. Check they've got the skills. Help them develop the skills. Because that's a lot of the time what's missing. Prioritise. People will follow your priorities. You ask them, how's the new stuff going? Every time, first time, every question, every meeting, they know they've got to be prepared for that. They will line up behind that. If you prioritise something else, they'll follow that instead. Prioritise the outcome of change. Participation. Key. There's the what and the how. The what is the change. The how is the path they get there. You, as leaders, set the what, and then you say, guys, how should we do this? Don't discuss the what. The what is decided. Get them to participate in the how. And then you're the person with the flags on the beach. You constrain where they do that. But that's how you create participation. We don't say, we're going to change there, and someone says, no, we should change over this way. No, that's what's happening. How do we do that? And the last thing is purpose. Bring back everything you do to that purpose. And here it's about the quality of the patient care. Every single thing is geared towards that. Your leadership is geared towards it. Their performance on a day-to-day basis is geared towards it. The organisation is geared towards it. Everything is geared towards that. And if that's a fundamental belief, and you say, we are passionate about patient care, and you say it over and over and over again, and you live it, you breathe it, you walk it, you will lead it. And that's the change that we're trying to see in the health service. So in summary, leadership matters. And the matters of leadership matter in your leadership. People and groups are geared to resist change, and we saw all of that. Change requires leadership. Every leader is a role model, and every leader is a coach. So as you go out of here today, you can imagine yourselves thinking about how you can apply some of these ideas, what you can watch out for in your people, and how you can think about those 6 things, the 3 C's and the 3 P's, to be able to really just help your team change from there to here. Because that's leadership. Leadership is helping them move from there to here, and then managing them there so you get the best outcomes. Any questions? Yes?
Comment on entrepreneurs, your slide 3 unconscious desires.
Yep. Yep. Entrepreneurs generally have a what they call an optimistic bias. So they're more likely to be optimistic and believe they do more effective forecasting positively. So they think that they can achieve things. They're prepared to take more risk, but they still run into the same thing. Their vision of what safety is different. So their idea of safety is not, am I going to lose my money? Safety for them might be about their image. They want to keep that image of being an entrepreneur, the risk taker. So the safety is more in their image rather than in the financial number in the bank. But Herman, who goes to work every day, and for him safety is just, I still have my job. So it's a very, everybody's got a different subjective view of what safety is. But entrepreneurs have a very much an optimistic bias, which is much greater than the normal population.
So does that mean that the 10% of the population are anxious and depressed?
No, not at all. They still are. You still see it all the time, particularly in those. I see a lot of anxiety in that group, and that's what drives them to it. They're not generally in the depressed classification, they're generally in the anxious classification. You see a lot of it. Because that's the energy that's driving them away from here towards something. Any other questions? I'll hang around for 5 or 10 minutes, so if you've got anything that you want to raise in the group, please feel free to come and grab me, bounce any ideas off me. But thank you for coming.